Hello, welcome to this video. My name is Nicole. I'm a linocut artist based in Melbourne, Australia, and this week we're doing my ultimate reduction printing tutorial. So in the past I've definitely covered aspects of this process and I've done maybe shorter tutorials, but this time I'm going to do my very best to go over every detail so that by the end of it you will be able to do the exact same reduction printing that I like to do in my work. Now, for the design and transferring to the block, I have already covered that for this specific print in an earlier video. I'm just going to link it in the corner here. So if you are interested in the design process, why I design the print the way that I do, how I lay the colors on top of each other, and why I choose to print in a specific color order, and also how I transfer my design from a sketch onto the block, do check out that video. The other thing that I will say is that I will do my best to go over all of the tools and the materials that I'm using for these prints, but if you have any questions or if I miss any of the details, I will put a link to my tools guide, which is a downloadable PDF that you can get free off my website. That will be in the description down below this video, so if you need that, do just download that for that extra information. Otherwise, I will get started with the video. We're cutting in straight to carving layer 1 of the block. So I've carved a little bit of this block. I'm still working away on it. If you've watched any of my tools tour videos, you'll have a good idea of the linocut carving tools that I prefer to use, but I'll just quickly go over what I'm using for this block right now. So I have 2 of these Korean Hwahong tools. There's a 2mm U and there's a 1mm U, so they look like this. I also have my Feel linocut tools. There is the smallest U tool available. I'll try and look up what it is when I post this because I always get asked, but it's literally just the smallest one available. And the same with the V, the smallest V available. And then I have this Easy Lions graver. So it's just got a flat tip. This one is the number 46. So how I use these is I tend to outline shapes usually in a small U, but sometimes in a slightly larger U shape, or in a V, mostly depending on like the shape I want the line to have at the ends. Like if I need a point, then the V is very important. Then I clear out the space either using one of the larger U tools. I also use this graver tool, which isn't technically a linocut tool, but I find really useful. I use this to clear larger spaces and to flatten out the lino so I don't get any of those kind of chatter marks where I want the paper to be clean. Okay, so I am about to glue my linocut block to this board. It's just a board of ply, relatively thin, I would say 3mm thick, something like that. I'm going to do this because the way that I register my reduction prints is inside my printing press. I have a jig which allows me to push my block or whatever it is stuck to into the corner, and then my paper also goes into the same kind of nook, and so that means that every time I put my block into my printing press it sits in the same position, and every time I put my paper in it also sits in the same position, which allows each layer of the print to line up accurately. So what I'm going to do is, this is slightly narrower than the A4 paper that I'm using, and I want this to be centered in it, so I'm just going to measure it up with the halfway point for A4 paper, and then I'm going to glue my block down. Alright, so we're ready to ink the block. Now the ink that I use is the Cranfield Calico Safe Wash ink. Here it is here. I don't necessarily recommend it above any other ink, but I do recommend that you use an oil-based ink if you can. It makes a really big difference to the quality of the print and how easy it is to print a block to use an oil-based ink. So I have some ink that I mixed up for a different print that I'm going to use as the basis for my colour, which fortunately is still wet. I was worried it was going to dry out. I've just wrapped this in a bit of baking paper to keep it fresh, and it's been sitting there for about 2 or 3 weeks, so it's done a good job of keeping it fresh. I'm going to lighten it up with this white. I'm also going to mix in some cobalt dryers. This helps speed up the drying process so I can get printing a little bit quicker. And I'll be rolling out my ink with this speedball rubber roller. My one is kind of sticky, but it still works perfectly fine. I just have to make sure that it hasn't picked up hairs or dust while it's been sitting. This colour has landed pretty well, but I'm just going to add a little bit of black because I was hoping for a little bit more of a greyish green, and this is kind of a bit sagey and cheerful for my taste. Okay, so we're going to start rolling out this ink. Now, you want to get a bit of ink on your roller, and then you want to shift it away from the body of the ink and start rolling it out. What we are looking for is for it to have a sort of orange skin kind of texture to the surface of the ink. And we're looking for a sort of soft sticky noise as it's rolling out, and to make sure that the ink is really even in your rolled out section. And so now we're going to apply the ink in nice thin layers across the block. Applying the ink in thin layers helps prevent any areas that are fine detail from flooding with ink, and keeps everything nice and clean and maintains all the detail that you want to have in your block. I like to soak my paper in water, but the only reason that I do this is that I use quite thick watercolor grade paper. If you're using a paper that you can get away with not wetting or with just spraying with a little bit of water, definitely do that, because there are some implications of the paper changing shape a little bit as you wet it, and that can cause a little bit of inconsistency when you're lining up your registration for subsequent layers. So I will soak my paper, and if you're using a thicker paper and you're struggling to get a good print, it is definitely a way that you can mitigate those challenges. Just make sure that once you're done soaking your paper that you've removed all of the water that you can. So I put my paper in a towel, and then I use a paper towel to lift the water off the printing surface. In my printing press, you'll notice that I have some metal that's been screwed to the side of the edges of my hand lever printing press. Now I use this to locate the block and the paper within the press so that I can get good registration for printing. So here we go, that is located. I'm going to take my paper out of the water. Put a new sheet into soak. You can see the nice embossing on the back of the paper already. And then we have layer 1. Okay, so I hang my prints up to dry. I hang them up for at least 4 days, but usually up to a week, to make sure that the print is dry enough to print the next layer on. This just ensures that the next layer is going to print evenly and nicely. None of the ink that I've printed is going to lift away, and because I'm using a water process, it does mean that the ink that's an oil ink is going to be nice and dry when I soak it. Okay, so I don't normally film this bit because it doesn't seem particularly like engaging or picturesque, but I just wanted to show you how I like to clean my blocks. Now, I like to use Jif to clean my block. I wouldn't recommend this for a block that you plan to keep printing for years in perpetuity, but because this is a reduction print and I can only print it a few times ultimately, so I've done 15 copies of this print, so that means I'm going to print it a maximum of 45 times. I'm not concerned that this is a grit cleaner because I've never seen it make any difference to the surface of the block. It's minimal, but over time I could see that potentially it could. So I just put the Jif cream on the surface of the block and I give it a rub until I see the ink lifting, and I just run some water. And once this is all rinsed off, you can see that my biro pen is still visible, the pencil and the ink has been washed off. Once this is all rinsed, I pat it dry with a paper towel, which removes any excess water and any excess little bits of cleaner left, and then I let it dry pressed under some heavy books. Okay, so it's been I think a bit over a week, maybe nearly 2 weeks since I printed layer 1 of my print. I wouldn't normally wait quite that long, but I've been a little bit busy. So now it's time to carve layer 2 on this block. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a colored pencil and I'm going to make sure that I've marked out and remember exactly what I need to be carving for this layer. So I'll get out my sketch again and I'm just going to mark everything that's going to be pink and therefore isn't going to be carved away, along with what's blue, which will be black in the final print, so that I'm very clear that I understand what I'm doing. And then I'm just going to carve away the bits that need to be carved away as per the first layer. So I will be using the same tools. It's important to outline things that need to be outlined, and then you can remove the middle as you need to. I don't think I have much to add at this stage. It's just a continuation of what I've been doing so far all along. Okay, so we're on to layer 2. I have carved the block. I feel like it's taken me quite a few days of work because this one is a little bit fiddly, but it's all carved and ready to go. And I've mixed up my pink color here. I've used a combination of butterlid yellow, rubine red, and white. And I'm just going to roll out that ink. I'm going to apply it in thin layers to the block, and I'm going to focus on only the areas where the pink exists on the block. On the other areas, especially the faces, I'm going to try and avoid getting any or too much pink onto those areas. Because I've used oil-based inks, I am soaking my paper, and this isn't a problem. The ink is not dissolving. I made sure it was properly dry before I started doing this work. It will soak happily, and then I pay a lot of attention to making sure that the printmaking surface is as dry as it can be. The paper is moistened, so it's softened and will take the ink as best it possibly can, despite being a relatively thick paper. But the surface that's being printed on is dry, so it won't affect the printing. Okay, so we're still using the jig in my press to make sure that both the block and the paper are aligned. Okay, so here's how we're looking at this stage. Now, I need to always remind myself, and I encourage you to do the same, to remember that if you're doing a print that has more than 2 layers, often the middle layers don't look right yet. So because there's still the black layer to go on this, and that's going to be really defining to how the finished print looks, it doesn't look 100% yet. So the print itself looks indistinct, it looks a little muddy, the colours don't quite feel like they're meshing yet, but when you put in the black layer, it all comes together. So things look a little weird right now, but you have to trust the process that it's going to come together in the next section. Okay, so it is finally time to carve the final layer, and then I will print the black layer, and then I'll be done. So I'm going to sit down and try and finish carving this morning, and then I hope to get on to printing this afternoon. The print is carved and all ready to go with the final layer. I'm really excited to see the print finished and come together with all the bits in it. I'm nervous a little bit about how it's going to come out, but mostly I'm excited and I think it's going to look really cool. I thought while I was setting up this one, I would just give you an idea of how I set up my workspace when I'm printing, because that is something that I haven't quite covered yet. So I set everything up in kind of a flow. I put my glass first. This will be where I do the inking up. I'll roll out my ink here. I will roll it onto my block here. I set my press up at the very end. This is the last thing I do before I hang my prints up on the wall. The water goes in the middle. There's my roller for this one. And my towel for drying my prints goes underneath the water. So I've just found that this setup is the most kind of ergonomic and efficient way to get prints through the printing process for me. I'm also just going to pull all the prints off the wall where they've been drying. So this is my setup ready to print. I have my inking station, my paper dampening station, and my printing station at the end, and then drying goes up on the wall. So to finish off, we're just doing black, and I'm going to put a little bit of these cobalt dryers into the mix. Now, before I touch my paper, I always inspect my hands to make sure that they're clean. There's a tiny bit of ink just on my thumb, so I'm going to go wash my hands and then I'm going to put my paper into soak. As I'm printing this, I have two main concerns for how this could go wrong. Well, maybe three. The first is alignment, so making sure that I've lined up everything as best I can. The second is making sure the surface of the print is as dry as I can get it, because any water might impact the way that the ink holds onto the paper. And the last is that because I have quite a lot of black area on the print, I need to make sure that that all fills in properly and I don't kind of have a speckling effect where it hasn't printed sufficiently. So I'll show you what I'll do about that, because I suspect that might be a problem I have. So, carefully lining everything up. Alright, so now I'm just going to check the print. So I'm going to roll up one side and I can see there is the speckle that I was worried about. So if we look here, you can see a speckle of pink behind the black, and I want to try and remove that. So the best way to remove that is to get a bit more ink on your roller and then come in and just re-ink, especially the areas that you're worried about. You have to be really careful doing this, because if I roll back too far I will hit the paper and that will wreck the print. So then we're just going to roll that through again. And I try to press down for a good few seconds. And then we're going to pick up, oh, I've got a little bit of ink. I've inked the back, but that's not such a disaster. Somehow I've picked up a bit of ink though, so let's just clean my hands quickly. Alright, let's try that again. So we're lifting up. We can see some specklings still. And we're coming in and just trying to eliminate that speckling. And ultimately you can do this as many times as you feel you need to in order to get the clean print that you're looking for. Another thing that I might do is burnish the back a little bit. In this case I'm using a glass. I'm feeling really good about that. That looks pretty good. And so there we have a finished print. I'm so excited to finally see this one done. Okay, so I thought I had wrapped up this video, but then I realized that there is still one more step to do before the print is completely finished. So this is the print. It's now a few days later. I think I printed it on Friday maybe, or Wednesday last week maybe, and now it is Tuesday the following week. The ink is still going to be a little bit wet, so I can, if I just rub my finger, it's probably going to transfer. It's actually doing pretty well. We've had very hot, good weather. So it's on its way to being dry. I'm not 100% convinced that it's ready to do this step. I would probably wait until next week to do the next step, but I will show you what I do. So because we've soaked this paper, we've soaked it 3 separate times, It is a little bit warped, and this is one of the less warped ones of those hanging on the wall drying still. So the next step would be to press it. In order to press it, I would get my spray bottle of water. I would spray the back, and then I would lay a stack of these prints between these plastic files. So I wouldn't put them in the files, I would just stack them up on these plastic files. And then I would spray another one and put that on top. And then on top of that, I would put a pile of books, maybe my printing press, maybe some of my letterpress. I would put heavy things on and leave it to sit for at least a few days until it's completely dry. And then once that's done, you've got perfectly dry prints. As the final step, I would edition them, which means I would go through all of the prints that I've done and I would pick out the very best prints. I might have a number in mind that I'm aiming for, but it will depend a little bit on the quality of the prints, if something's over inked or under inked or not lined up as perfectly as I would like. I'll go through and pick out the best ones, and then that determines the number of my edition for a reduction edition. And I would write in the corner sequentially, like 1 of 12, 2 of 12, 3 of 12. And that would be my edition. I would also sign probably or put a maker's mark in the right hand corner. And that would be my editioning done. Then it would be ready to sell or give away or send off to people or keep as an art edition of a series of prints. Just in terms of this plastic, it's my preference to not buy this new. I found this either for free or secondhand. You can pretty much always find these files in a secondhand shop because they're so ubiquitous and people just get rid of them. So if you're in need of some, if you're in need of some plastic to do things like pressing prints or other processes like that, I suggest that you just have a look at a secondhand store and pick some up that way. Okay, hopefully I've covered everything that you wanted to know about reduction printing. I did film this over maybe 6 weeks in total because from the time that I was doing the very first layer through till the end, the prints were hanging and drying and I was carving the next layer, and so time has definitely passed and it's hard to remember exactly what I covered throughout, but hopefully I've covered everything you wanted to know. If you do have any questions, please leave me a comment down below and I'll do my best to answer. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and if you would like to see more printmaking content from me, please subscribe to my channel. I put up new videos each week. As ever, thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next video.